Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Coming of Cage podcast. I am your host, Derek, and I've got my buddy Ryan with me.
Hi.
Hi. Hi, hi, hi. We are here for our 1 year anniversary to talk about the 2017 Nicolas Cage led film, The Humanity Bureau.
Yes, which we've been planning on doing for our 1 year anniversary for the full year because, it's such a highly rated film.
I know. Yeah, it's iconic. It's an iconic film. But we have been doing this. We have been doing the Coming of Cage podcast for a year. We have covered 25 Nicolas Cage movies up until this point. And, we thought it might be fun just real quick to mention maybe a couple of high points and maybe a low point or two. So Ryan, what's a high point over these 25 films? What's one that you really like? Maybe it surprised you didn't know?
Just one? Okay,
or two. It doesn't have to, you tell me.
Well, I mean, so of the one that surprised me the most is probably a mainstream film that wouldn't surprise most people because they've seen it. I just hadn't seen it, and that was Moonstruck. I loved it. But if I had to go with like movies that are maybe surprising to probably more than the average moviegoer, like more of a Nic Cage enthusiast, It Could Happen to You was surprisingly good. That was one of our early ones, and I really enjoyed that one.
Episode 2.
And then The Trust was surprisingly good as well, in my opinion. Now, a lot of people I'm sure will disagree, but I really enjoyed that one. So yeah, those are two like deeper cuts of Nic Cage movies that I've enjoyed in these first 25 that were definitely surprising to me. What about you?
That's really nice. I agree with you on...
Oh, that's a cop-out.
No, on The Trust. I agree with you on The Trust. I think The Trust is a hidden gem that most people, ourselves included, missed, for a number of reasons. But that was surprisingly good. Elijah Wood's also great in it, as well as Nick. But for me, and this is one I'm sure a lot of people had seen, but I hadn't, and that's The Family Man.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
I really like The Family Man. And those who don't know me, I am Jewish. Christmas is not my jam, but I do have a few Christmas movies I love. Jingle All the Way, Home Alone, The Santa Claus, and now
this one's going to get added to the rotation.
Yeah, it was really nice. So The Family Man.
Yeah.
But there's also been some bad movies on this list. I'm sorry, Mr. Cage, but there's been some rough movies in here. And for me, I'm just going to go with my bottom two because I rated them both the same from a quality standpoint. The bottom two are Zondali, which I think is not surprising, as well as Prisoners of the Ghostland, which was incomprehensible throughout most of the film. At least I know what happened in Zondali. It might have been terrible, but I can explain it to somebody.
Yeah, that's fair.
What about you? Anything that you really didn't care for?
So, I mean, both of those movies, I think I like Prisoners of the Ghostland a little more than you did, because I at least saw like the artistic value in it. But Zondali, I agree, was definitely one of my lower points. But probably I brought this up before, and I feel bad because it was a well-made movie, but it's been the most boring movie I think that we've watched, and that was The Cotton Club. It was, even a lot of the other bad movies we've watched have at least kept my attention through the movie. But man, I guess the Croods would be on there too, and there's apparently a whole online community of Croods fans. Is probably going to really hate me now, but. The Croods was so bad that I couldn't even remember the things you were talking about that happened at the end. I mean, I know I was there for it and it was playing, but I 100% don't remember if I fell asleep during it or just what happened, because I don't remember many of the things you mentioned happening at the end of the movie. And my notes that's the only time my notes have been completely incomprehensible. So, and Cotton Club was, man, it was it was a well-made movie. And it was about important subjects and something that I actually do find interesting, that era. But, man, it just was not for me. Yeah.
Well, I've got good news and bad news for you. The good news is Cotton Club did not get a sequel.
But the Croods did. Well, allegedly the Croods sequel is better than the first one from what I've heard. So it may not be rated higher, but I have heard from a few people that the sequel is better. So I hope so.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay. Well, there you have it. If you've been following this journey with us through these first 25 films, our first year of the show, and you have a movie that's stuck out to you, good or bad, let us know. Go to comingofcage.com, find us at Coming of Cage for all of that. And you can also find, we're going to start posting, starting with our next episode, we're testing it out here. We'll be posting a Coming of Cage Cage-O bingo card.
Yeah, this is a thing that I've joked about a few times, or both of us have joked about a few times, and things that happen in, if you listen to these episodes, there's a few things that I say basically every time that always happen in a Nic Cage movie, or happen the majority of the time. And yeah, so we finally created our business card, our bingo card. And yeah, we're going to be playing. We'll probably be doing a separate segment. We haven't quite figured it out yet, but we'll probably be doing a separate segment that we'll post on social medias. But yeah, it should be fun. And maybe we'll release some of the bingo cards, you know, for people to play along at home too. But we haven't talked about that. That's just me running off on a tangent.
No, I think we will. I think it'll be fun. We'll post one each week or each episode, and you can use that card for that episode and play along as you watch the movie. Yeah. I will say I didn't get a bingo this episode. Did you get a bingo this episode?
I did not. I filled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 plus the free space. So
I got so close. I'm missing one.
And Derek and I are using different cards, and we do have some different criteria that might be swapped in from week to week. You know, so we'll see what happens. It'll all be random all the time. We're not going to plan ahead of time or anything like that. So
yeah, it'll be fun. So stay tuned for that. But now it's time to talk about the star of our 1-year anniversary episode, The Humanity Bureau, which is, quote, a dystopian thriller set in the year 2030 that sees the world in a permanent state of economic recession and facing serious environmental problems as a result of global warming. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't remember the movie ever stating the year being 2030.
Okay, so that's a lot of my notes were trying to determine the year, so we'll definitely hit that up. I was actually going to ask you about that because the first thing I want to say is that, you know, not every one of these movies is super easy to acquire as a free viewing experience. So sometimes I have to go through alternative means to find the movie. And this one, the version that I watched, the entire like opening text where it's like setting up the movie was in a different language. And I'm not sure what language it was.
It was on Peacock, man. I just watched it on yeah, I watched it on Peacock.
Okay, well, that's on me then. But, you know, in this case, yeah, it was in a totally different language. I don't feel like it really would have helped me understand what's going on necessarily because, you know, maybe it would have been a little less confusing right in the beginning. But, I mean, eventually it was pretty straightforward what was going on.
There wasn't much to it. I mean, I'm not going to waste people's time, but if you go to the IMDb under quotes, it does have each of the title cards typed out in case you do want to read what they are. I will say that the date makes 0 sense because Nick has a line later in the movie where he says they haven't made a car in 30 years.
Hey, you're jumping ahead, man.
No, I know, but like just the synopsis says 2030, which means they would have already had to have stopped making cars when they were making the movie. So it just doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. So whoever wrote that synopsis, I'm sorry, the date's wrong. I would say just remove that and just say this takes place in the future. Sure. So there we go. It's a dystopian future. There's no water. There's no plants. There's no food. There's walled off cities like Judge Dredd, but nowhere near the budget of even the Stallone Judge Dredd movie. And so here we are.
Right. And we start off with a horrible cage driving green screen.
We start with the drone that comes in. And that looked equally bad.
Yeah. And then we get Cage driving in the green screen, which is actually on our bingo card.
It is
bad green screen Nic Cage driving because a lot of these we'll reference a lot, and we've referenced that in several movies. Dog Eat Dog, I think, and what was the one with the kidnapped daughter in the trunk of the taxi?
Stolen.
Yeah, I mean, there's been several movies where we've had that. So
I
think even The Trust had some bad green screen driving, but yeah, that's a pretty common one for us. So, but that's how we basically start off the movie, apart from the drone. My next note is that selling clean water is a felony
without a license. You have to be a licensed clean water salesperson.
Okay, so you have played at least one Fallout game.
I've played parts of several. I've just only
that's all I was asking. And so, yeah, a lot of the things happening in this movie remind you of Fallout?
Yes,
okay.
They did. I mean, not the cool aesthetic, which is what really gets me in the Fallout,
Right.
is the aesthetic.
It was like Fallout, like the stuff that is Fallout, but not everything that makes it really extra cool,
it was none of the fun stuff.
Right.
It wasn't tongue in cheek. It was very serious. Like Fallout's a little more satire, right?
Yeah.
This is like the serious version of it with a lower
Yes.
budget. I'm
This
going to
is
keep hitting the lower budget because I really think that's the Achilles heel of this movie is the lack of money.
I think that's part of it, yeah. But yeah, there was a lot of things that reminded me, and I'll probably reference it in my notes several times. But yeah, starting out with the clean water thing, because in Fallout games, it's similar where finding clean water is a big deal. It's very rare, and it's not easy to acquire. And they're definitely like leaning hard into that in this movie.
Yeah, throughout the film.
Yeah. So at this point, they're just kind of setting up the movie, which is that Nic Cage is like a government worker.
Bingo.
Which is also on the bingo card, that works for the Humanity Bureau that's in charge of judging how productive humans are.
Americans specifically.
Americans. And if they are not productive, then they get sent to a place called New Eden. And if they are
like an insurance adjuster, basically. But
yeah, he goes in and calculates like some sort of number that determines if somebody's productive enough. And so yeah, at this point, we get a little line that says being a productive citizen is the law. That shows us, at this point, if you're not productive enough per the government's I think the rule was you have to put in more than you take out, essentially. They mentioned that at one point, that you have to be more productive than what you take.
They do say that, but I do think that it's not quite explained well because people have ration cards. For example, they mentioned that the guys used up his government benefits, and it wouldn't really be possible for people to get a bunch of government benefits but also contribute more than they're taking, because then they wouldn't need the benefit. It's not explained very well.
Yeah. So you see him, basically the scene is he's rolling into a town and he's going to see this old man to
At
do
like
his
a rundown motel.
Yeah, he's going to go do his audit or whatever you would call it. And so he goes to this guy's house, and they make a major point of showing like the dishes have maggots on them and there's flies, and he's just living in this horrible like environment that would for most people be a major problem. And they make a point to show the poster on the wall that says like "Make America Great," which is obviously a reference to certain political things that have happened recently. And this movie was in 2017, so it would have been relevant. And then there was also a poster of Trump, Donald Trump, which is weird if this is set so much later. But
well, we find out that this guy, when he was younger, was, I think, maybe governor or senator of Montana.
Yeah.
And so he knew he was friendly with. And so I think there's even a photo of the two of them together when he's younger.
Right. I think that's what it shows. Maybe it wasn't a poster. Maybe there was both. I don't remember. But yeah, at some point it shows Donald Trump in one of the photos. And so apparently this guy is going to get sent to New Eden. And so he asks to go to the bathroom or steps aside or something like that. And he goes and grabs a gun. And he says, "I know the truth," and blasts through the door, attempting to kill Nicolas Cage's character,
Noah Cross.
Noah, and does not kill him, because that would have been a short movie. But yeah, then eventually he comes out and he's still screaming about the truth, and he gets killed.
He does end up killing the motel person, the guy running the motel.
The motel person hears the gunshot and runs up and then gets shot by him. It looked like a double-barreled shotgun, so that was probably his second shot. So he was probably done at that point. And so then I believe it was Nic Cage's character that killed him.
Yeah, he shoots 3 times, gets him like right between the eyes. It becomes a point throughout the film that doesn't really resolve itself.
And it's also funny. Derek and I have very different life experiences, but something that has been a life experience of me is shooting guns. And gunplay in movies is important to me as far as immersion goes. And the gunplay in this movie, they clearly had no one on set and no training ahead of time. Because when he pulls out the gun, he's like aiming all over the place. You can tell he's not even barely pointed anywhere near the guy. And you hear the gunshots, and then the guy is magically shot in the head. But the gun was at no point aimed anywhere near the guy's head, and it's just distracting. The gun has no weight, so when he pulls it out, it's like flopping on his hand like an airsoft gun. Yeah. And maybe that's not an important point for a lot of people, but for me, it does kind of break immersion.
There's a scene later that we'll get to that I think was just even worse.
There is. Yeah, I know the scene you're talking about. But yes, this set up the action scenes for this movie as something that should be not looked forward to. You know,
this was the bar at this point.
Yes, and I think that's another point on our list or on our bingo is bad action sequences. This one is definitely loaded up with those.
Nic shoots a gun.
Yes, both bingos.
There you go.
Yeah, so my next one is fishing practice because he goes, I think he goes back to either the Bureau headquarters.
It's his apartment.
Or his apartment, something like that. Yeah, and he's got like a fly. He's got pictures referencing that he's a fly fisherman, but then it shows him multiple times tying up a jig that is not a fly. Like he has a trophy for fly fishing. But then that flashback sequence where it shows somebody like up close tying a fishing lure on, that is absolutely not a fly fishing lure.
I think he was just supposed to be like into fishing across the board.
Sure, but they showed a specific trophy that said it was a trophy for fly fishing. So it's just kind of weird that they wouldn't just show a fly. Like, what's the difference? You know, why not show a fly fishing lure if you know that he's a champion fly fisher?
My guess is somebody had that trophy in
exactly
storage, right?
And the prop guy is like, well, I got a fly fishing trophy that I won if you want me to put it in there.
And then they were like, well, no one's gonna care about that.
Right, exactly. Or maybe he's just such a good fisherman that he just is an expert at multiple types, which is possible, although there haven't been lakes in 20 years or something like that. So that was part of the big thing in this movie is that there's no water that's clean, you know, and the lakes have been gone.
He's still really good. Like he casts it right in the cup and stuff, and like the aiming, like that keeps coming up that he's like some crazy marksman. I was really thinking that was going to pay off at some point.
Right, like he was going to hook the bad guy at the end or something.
Or something.
But yeah, it really doesn't. There's no payoff for that.
No.
It just sets up like where he wants to go in the end of the movie because that's where he was when he was a kid and he was fishing.
Which, by the way, so Adam Westinghouse is the big bad. It takes him way too long to figure that out.
Yeah,
I just want to throw that out there.
The writing in this movie overall was not good. The dialogue was bad. I will say overall, I did actually enjoy this movie. Like it kept my attention. It was not a good movie by any means, but it was almost like it reminded me of other bad movies that were not intentional. Like now that there's a trend for making intentionally bad movies.
Right. This was like a real B movie.
This was a real bad movie that was that had some appeal because it was so bad. And like the dialogue was just fucking terrible, real bad. So yeah, my next note is major fallout energy from this so far. I don't really remember what really set that off, but there's definitely like, yeah, it was like somebody played a Fallout game and decided to remove everything that makes that franchise really cool, like we already talked about.
Right.
So I told my girlfriend that I was watching the movie with that if they started playing like 40s music, I would have been totally that would made the movie go up like a point or two on my scale immediately. But they didn't do that at all. So my next note is about his choice of car because the Humanity Bureau has many different vehicles throughout this movie. It seems that the majority of them are Dodge Durangos.
Yeah, SUVs.
But he drives a 1981 El Camino. Which I didn't recognize at first because it's kind of a later model El Camino, not the ones that like people actually want. I mean, I'm sure somebody out there is an enthusiast for this generation of El Camino, but it's not the like classic El Camino. It's like an 80s El Camino right before they stopped making them. And it's just not like the best looking car in the world. But for some reason, he has a mint, like spotless version of this El Camino that he put Humanity Bureau stickers all over.
Well, did he do that or is it a company car?
I imagine that the way he talks about this car later in the movie makes me feel like he chose the car because I can't imagine there's ever any government agency is like we're going to use an El Camino and then everything else is going to be Dodge Durangos.
I mean, I'm with you. My only thought was just that if it's true that they haven't made a car in 30 years, that maybe they just use whatever they have. and the guy who goes out by himself just gets the 2-seater, you know?
Well, yeah, I more saw it as if people can provide their own car, then they just slap the stickers on, and call it good. But either way, I
Maybe.
don't want to dig too deep
No.
into the lore of this movie, but
But
um,
it's got like a dystopian grill attached to the front of it though,
right,
you know,
it does, yeah. And so
armor it up a bit.
this is when I started questioning what year this movie is, because
Okay.
it's not clear. We read that synopsis, but I had not read that prior to watching this movie. So I
Right.
had no idea what year this actually was supposed to be. So I was trying to figure that out through the years of the cars. So, I mean, I knew that was an early 80s El Camino at this point. So I figured at the very least it's 2010. But then that wouldn't have made sense with the Donald Trump stuff.
Right. Right.
So I figured it had to be at least like 2017 or 2018 at this point. But there's more clues later that I'll get into as to when I was trying to figure out this movie that also lend credibility to your assessment that it was not actually 2030. So yeah, I at this point there was several green screen driving moments,
Mm-hmm.
and it started to feel reminiscent of like really old serial type movies, like 50s
Oh,
serial movies, where they did
yeah.
that on purpose. Like, well, that was the style then, but it felt like they were trying to emulate that almost. And I can't this at this point I couldn't tell if it was just really bad green screen or if they were trying to emulate that look.
That's
You know what
really
I mean?
interesting. Yeah, maybe it was on purpose. I don't know. I can't say, but I can definitely see it now that you're mentioning it.
In
Because like,
2017, like we had the technology to do decent green screen for fairly cheap with driving. So it
yeah,
makes me think that that was an intentional choice, but I don't know why. I'm trying to figure out the reason, but
maybe just to kind of like create the headspace for him. Because they've also set it up where now we only get to see him go on 2 cases, so we don't get like a huge back catalog here to build him up. But both of them are out in the middle of nowhere, so he has to leave New Vegas. Um, Fallout reference again, I
yeah.
guess. To go see these people. They're hundreds of miles away from the city. And so I don't know. Maybe they're just trying to set that kind of old timey feel. That's interesting.
It's certainly possible. It's also, they use that with a lot of like private investigator movies, things like that, and like noir type
Mm-hmm.
movies. And this was about like an investigator. So maybe they're just trying to correlate that. I'm not sure. But I thought that's at this point in the movie is where I realized that may be a purposeful choice rather than just cheap green screen, because we have seen the cheap green screen in a lot of other movies.
Mm-hmm.
And this felt more purposeful than that. Maybe I'm giving the director too much credit, but anyway, we'll never know unless we get to interview the director at some point. But um so at this point he goes to his next case is to go to a woman with a child. And when he first introduces himself to her, he says Mrs. and she says no, it's just Miss. And so my next note was she corrected him from Mrs. to Miss. She must be the romantic lead.
Well done,
And
sir.
there
Well
it
done.
is. Yeah, exactly. It didn't
Well
take a lot of
done.
detective work for that, to be honest. But so he meets this woman and her kid, and he's doing like running the numbers, and she comes out of like the bathroom or something, and he hides the numbers because apparently it's a big secret. But then when the kid comes over and she's not in there later, he's fine with it. He just leaves them up, and the kid's like, "Do you carry a gun?" He's like, yeah, it's a Beretta 92 FC or whatever it was. And he's like, here, you want to see it? And he just takes a clip out and like pulls the bullet out and hands him this kid this gun. I
That
mean,
he's known for like a couple hours.
yeah, just lets the kid play with the gun. And, obviously when you have a gun, you can take the bullets out, but you're never, I mean, it's just a general rule that you probably shouldn't do something like that. And to
We
always
do,
treat a gun as if it was loaded.
yeah, absolutely. And you do learn later maybe why he was trying very hard to make the kid happy. I don't know if you want,
Yes. Later on, you do
but
learn that, but at this point, we had no idea.
no.
It was a little weird. Um, Also, at this point, it was incredibly obvious to me what New Eden was. I watched this other show that I think I've talked to you briefly about called Future Man.
Yeah.
And in one of the seasons of Future Man, there is a storyline about this place where they're going to take these people and they're going to be happy. They can't stay on this earth. They have to go to another planet, or they call it like the Mars Project or something like that. And in the end, it was the Mars acronym stood for something like murdering all something. I don't remember. But that's at this point I was like, okay, so is New Eden code for murdering unproductives? And spoiler alert, yes, it absolutely is. It was super obvious from the beginning. You know, you're sending people there and nobody's ever hearing from them. It's a pretty common you know, not that Future Man is the only one to have ever done that, but that was just what popped into my mind
Yeah.
because it's something I was very familiar with.
Well, I
But
think that's the
yes,
problem. I think this movie would play a lot better if it had been made in like the 50s or the 60s because
yeah,
the whole premise is a very classic sci-fi Logan's Run era, yeah, 70s, but type premise,
yeah,
right? And it's just being made in 2017 with no budget. And so I'm with you.
yeah. And it's fine. I mean, it's just not that unique of a storyline. And if it seemed like later it was supposed to be a surprise, but it wasn't a surprise at all. The like hints that they give earlier in the movie were very heavy-handed.
Well,
Um,
also like it just they don't do a good job of selling it to the audience because at the end of the day, they're like, okay, so the quote least productive people end quote are going to get sent to this magical
Paradise?
special
Yeah,
paradise.
why?
Why? How can we afford that?
What's the
Where
motivation to work then? Because if you don't, then you get sent to paradise. So that seems like a win-win.
right? So like it didn't seem like that made any sense. And then of
It didn't
course
make
that
any sense.
the kid talks about how his friend went there and he never heard from him again. You're like, okay, this is just they're all dead.
Right, exactly.
They're either
Um,
dead or it's a prison camp, one of the two, but it's certainly
Something
nothing
like
good.
that. Yeah. I mean, I assumed death,
Yeah.
but that's just because I go to the worst possible scenario. And then Nick Cage gets slapped. I don't remember what happened specifically. My next note was slapping Nick Cage.
He's trying so he knows they have to leave and he's trying to talk her into it in a nice positive way and not have her like run or whatever
Because he
because
doesn't know
he
that this
doesn't
is a
know.
murder thing at this point. He thinks he's actually sending people to like this paradise or whatever.
Right. And he's like, well, why would you want to stay here and yada 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 and she gets fed up with him and slaps him
Yes.
because he gives her the pamphlet, the brochure,
Yeah.
which that was pretty funny.
Right. That's all he's seen from New Eden is a brochure.
Right.
And we don't even ever get to see the brochure. So at this point, the audience has like no information on New Eden other than what the Nick Cage character has said and all the other very heavy-handed hints
Mm-hmm.
about what it is.
I mean, between there's like a billboard we get to see and that TV commercial. And so I think like from that, I gather they're pitching it like it's a retirement community kind of vibe.
Right.
That's the vibe I was getting.
So then the kid is like playing around. He goes up to the roof. What is he trying to do on the roof? I can't remember. Oh, he finds a baby bird on the ground.
Yeah.
Yes, that is still alive. And he sees the nest up in like the chimney of the house. So he gets up on the roof and he tries to return the baby bird to the nest in the chimney. And in doing so, I mean, I don't think he successfully does it. So the baby bird probably died either way. But
Well, no, because we see Nick with the dead bird later.
oh, do we?
Yeah.
I guess I missed that.
Yeah.
But yeah, he falls off the roof and like is dead for a little while until Nick Cage starts hitting him in the back.
He does CPR.
Kind of. He does a form of CPR.
A form of CPR. Look, this is 2030 CPR, Ryan. You don't even know.
It's so advanced. Yeah, and the kid comes back to life magically. And so the next scene is like the mom bathing the kid. And Nick Cage is like around the corner.
Yeah, that's when he's holding the bird.
Oh, is it? Okay,
Yeah.
I guess I didn't look at his hands, but yeah, it was a weird scene. Like, why is he staying with this family? Why is the door open when this kid is bathing and he's like right around the corner? It's just very uncomfortable. And why did he stay at the house that long? So it was bright part of the day when he goes and saves his kid's life.
Well, because we need him too, because it furthers the plot along with our other character.
I mean, that's the obvious answer, but it doesn't make any sense in context. Okay, so in the next scene is where my investigative work for the year continues. We see some Humanity Bureau vehicles at like Humanity Bureau headquarters, and they are Dodge Durangos, and they did not start making Dodge Durangos until 1998. So at this point, Nick has already said that they haven't made vehicles in 30 years. Oh no, he hadn't said that yet. So I knew at this point that this definitely takes place after 98, but I had already figured that out. But that gives me at least a year context, if there were any context clues. Later we find out 30 years. But Um, so I don't remember how this was set up, but he at some point gets to an elevator with this guy and they have a meeting because he wants to find out what he goes back to where that old man incident happened and finds a piece of paper.
So this scene is confusing. I believe the scene is a flashback. I
Oh,
think
okay.
we didn't get to see him do that the first time.
The
And it's
piece of
being
paper.
shown to us now as explanation because he's sitting on this bench and this guy in a truck throws him an empty matchbook or match case that's got like writing in it. And then he goes to a greenhouse and there's a pamphlet there and he goes somewhere else. Like it's very much like he's working with some type of network of people
Yeah.
that he got in contact with somehow. We never really learn how he knows about them. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So then he gets to this meet. Basically, all these clues lead to an elevator where he gets into an elevator and there's an attendant in there that seems a little, suspicious. And so they get into the elevator and, after a few floors, the attendant hits the button and starts talking to him. And Nick's character, Noah, tells him that he wants to find out the truth about New Eden. And so he gives him like it looks like maybe, I don't know, it's some future thing, but it looks like a USB stick.
USB-D.
Yeah, it looks like a USB stick of some kind. And so he gets that USB stick and goes home.
Now
And
do we already know about his boss investigating him? Did that already happen at this point? Is that later?
probably, yeah, probably.
So his boss.
I think the scene with the Durangos that I saw was when it shows that he's being investigated. Yeah, yeah. So his boss is suspicious of him.
Yeah.
And they talk about this woman. So while he was with this woman, the woman said, well, can we just have 24 hours because he has a recital that he's been practicing for months, and it would break his heart to not do it. And so Noah, Nic Cage's character, says, no, we can't do that. But then he puts in a request anyway to delay the sending of them to New Eden or whatever. And then that shows that the boss is suspicious of him and what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the next scene is the recital. And apparently what this kid has been practicing and preparing for months was to be on the stage and say the Pledge of Allegiance by himself. So.
Well, you did skip that Nick does watch what's on the USB.
He does. And he just goes, oh God, what have we done? Or something like that.
Clearly means nothing good.
Right. Yeah, but it doesn't show anything. No. So, but there is a reference to the scene that shows it from another angle later, right, of course, because that's how you build suspense in a movie like this, I guess. But yeah, so he shows up to this kid's recital and the kid says the Pledge of Allegiance really well. It took months to prepare for this. And so that was my next note. He's been practicing for months for the Pledge of Allegiance ? Anyway, I thought that was funny. But yeah, then we get a scene of them back at the house and we see the boss standing on like this hill. And this isn't like a desert type environment. There's not like green trees around or anything. It's just barren. And he's in all black. So on this hill facing maybe like a quarter mile from the house, just like watching the house, but somehow nobody sees him. He would literally look like a person dressed in all black, even a quarter mile away. You'd be able to see that. It would stand out as something unnatural going on, but he misses it. So they, I think, see some dust coming over the hill as if vehicles were traveling in, and Noah runs in and tells them to get all their stuff and get ready. And the boss comes in and starts doing boss villain things.
Shit goes down.
Yeah, the kid shoots him in the eye with a BB gun, which I found hilarious. And also a Fallout reference, because when you're a kid in that game, or in 4, I can't remember which one. In one of them, basically there's a whole scene when you're a kid where you're given a BB gun and you have to go shoot some like mutant cockroaches with it. Anyway, It was just funny. They took a lot of things from those games. But yeah, then we get some like really bad action fights from Nic Cage and the villain. A lot of like cuts. I don't really know how fun way to say that. Just a lot of cuts. Yeah. You a lot of times you only see legs moving or like hands. You can't see the faces. just really poor action, which is unfortunate. But it did give me a bingo spot, so I mean, there is a plus side. And so at some point he escapes from them, and they all are in the El Camino, and they get away. He like kills all these people. He's wounded the big boss. The kid wounded the big boss and left them.
It is important to note that Adam Westinghouse is the bad guy boss. He and Noah are like really good friends. They're close. They're buddy.
That's what the movie tells you, but there's nothing really to support that.
No.
Yeah, so they get into the El Camino and they get away as like another car of agents pull up. And somehow these agents just can't turn around and catch the El Camino. But while they're in the El Camino, I know you love this scene. He's like, all right, revert all fuel to the space thrusters. And he's like going through this list of stuff that's talking about like reverting fuel and like so my next note was, is this El Camino a spaceship? Because they have to like go through this whole sequence of commands about the things that they're doing to make it from this place.
So I both like and dislike that scene for very different reasons. So yeah, he's got two tanks. He's got a reserve tank for fuel, right? And so he's transferring fuel from one to the other or whatever. But here's the thing. Like, you've got an El Camino. There's a giant like open bed in the back that they've shown is completely empty. Where's the reserve tank?
Yeah, I mean, I had less of a problem with that than just the way he was like commanding it like a spaceship. Like it reminded me of the captain of the Enterprise or whatever saying, you know, that we have to do, like he's telling the computer to do these things or telling like a subordinate to do these things. It very much felt like that. It was super weird. But yes, where, you know, a second fuel tank is a fairly common thing on like big trucks and things like that.
Sure.
But on an El Camino, there's no room for a second tank. And yeah, like you said, you can clearly see the back of the vehicle. Maybe it wouldn't be a problem for like non-car enthusiasts. But yeah, if there was a secondary tank, it would have like 2 gallons of fuel or something in it. It would be so small that it wouldn't even be worth it.
But that's the thing. Like they purposely show the kid, Lucas, like in the bed of the truck, hopping up and down at one point and stuff like earlier before they have to leave.
Yeah.
Like they go out of their way to show that there's nothing in the bed of the car. You know, and like that just kind of annoyed me because like it does make sense in universe for him to have 2 tanks because he's driving hundreds and hundreds of miles in the desert. There aren't really any gas stations. It makes sense.
Gas is harder to find. Yeah.
So logically, I get that, but you also like you couldn't have just put like a box in the bed of the car to like, you know,
to make it look like a fuel cell or something. But
anything.
Yeah, I mean, a Durango is believable that it could have a second gas tank
because it could be inside. You'd never know. But they could have been like a crate. They could have just put a crate back there and painted it. What am I gonna know?
Yeah, exactly. It was a weird scene, and there's no real relevance to it. Like it's only referenced that one time. I mean, they do go get gas later, but
I do think it's a little important because once they get gas that first time,
they never get gas again. Yeah,
never, not one. It's never referenced that they need gas ever. And they go all the way from New Vegas, which I'm assuming is near where current Vegas is, so Nevada, all the way up through Montana to Canada.
Yeah,
on 2 tanks of gas, I guess.
So, speaking of gas, my next note is, why are the gas pumps from the 50s? It went more to like the stealing from Fallout because, you know, aesthetically, we mentioned that nothing really was from Fallout aesthetically, which is one of the, you know, the best parts of those games was the aesthetics. But for some reason in this gas station that they go to, all the pumps are like Fallout era pumps from the, you know, 50s and 60s.
I have a theory. Here's my theory. Infrastructure is so messed up. Everything is so destroyed. It's easier to repair a more analog pump than it would be a modern, say, like, you know, Quick Trip type, you know, BP.
So you're telling me that when whatever happened to make this a post-apocalyptic place happen, they went to a bunch of the gas stations and were like ripping out the newer equipment and raiding antique stores to go find old gas pumps.
I don't know. Maybe those types of gas stations still exist out there. I mean, I've never been in the desert of Nevada, so
it was just a weird thing. Yeah, I haven't either, but Yeah, it was weird. But yeah, in this scene, he doesn't actually pump gas from the pumps because it doesn't do anything when he tries.
Well, it doesn't accept his card, like his identity card thing. Like he's already been locked out of the system.
So the proprietor of the gas station comes out and just like stares at him.
This poor guy.
And basically he gets mugged for all his gas.
Well, he
And
goes along with it. He changes his tune.
It is weird. He changes his tune real quick. Like he's aggressive with him immediately, and then 2 seconds later they're best friends. And he has like the stash of old gas cans.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a pump. Like he could probably override the pump or something, but instead he just has this stash of old gas cans that are filled with gas.
So my thought there is that the government
took those with him.
Well, no, that like the government doesn't know about those cans. Right. And maybe he's been like slowly like topping off those from other people or something, to have like a reserve. But if he were to tamper with the tanks with those chips on them, then like that's probably like a felony or whatever. And he'd end up in jail or New Eden himself.
Right. Yeah. Because the tanks being from the 50s is so much easier to work on than the tanks from the 2000s.
I don't know about that. I'm talking about the chip reader.
No, I know. But then they have to install a futuristic chip reader into it.
Well, because there's no money. It's all digital. But like, this is all completely run down. Like Rachel, she's the main woman character. She goes inside at one point and like the shelves, there's nothing on the shelves except for like a box of Twinkies that she ignores for some reason.
They made a point to show that.
Yeah, she's looking for food, but doesn't even check the box. I don't know what that was.
Well, but Twinkies are barely food, but okay. Yeah, at this point,
like this guy dies, right? Like there's no way he survives.
Right, he gets into his car and he hits one of the government vehicles while they're chasing the El Camino to try and like give them time, even though he just met them, but for some reason is all on their side magically. And so he runs into one of the vehicles and damages it, but there's still at least one more chasing him.
Well, what we do learn is a bit of a spoiler at the end, though, is that like there's this whole network of people that know about New Eden and they've been coordinating to help people escape from being sent to New Eden. And so I took it as he's part of that group.
Sure. Why not? So then we get a shot of his boss, which is the main villain of the movie. And now he's wearing an eye patch.
Yeah, he is.
This is the point where now he is the villain confirmed.
Solid black eye patch. I mean, it's on the poster.
Yeah.
But the poster spoils the BB gun scene for sure.
And we see him because there's a meeting at the evil person headquarters where they have
Legion of Doom.
It's a meeting with like 4 people, and they're surrounding this pallet of boxes. And there's, at first there's no explanation given for these boxes, and it's just 4 people standing around these boxes, and they're just having a meeting. And then at the very end of the meeting, the head evil person is like, well, we must stop him, and dips his hand or her hand, I can't remember, into the box and pulls out a bunch of ashes. And then they said, what is this, a chicken bone or a bone or something?
Not
like
a chicken bone. He knows it's human.
And the other person goes, that appears to be a child's tooth, sir. All right. And he like shows him, and it's supposed to be some big intimidating scene, but yeah, that basically confirmed that New Eden was murder. If at that point you had not figured it out. They are sending people off to be barbecued.
But aside from that, on a lighter note, this scene just solidified for me like how little money this movie had, because it's just anything that takes place in the city is an extremely generic, empty area.
Courtyard. Yeah.
With like no furniture, no chairs, no tables, nothing that looks
people.
Like anybody, no people. There's no extras. There are no extras in this movie, other than like at the motel, right? Like it is barren wasteland where they knew a guy who had like a building that hadn't been opened yet or something.
Yeah. And around this point, I had realized how bad the acting and the writing was in this movie. And it started to make me wonder, because of that, the driving scenes kind of piquing my, maybe this on purpose, interest earlier. It made me go, is this on purpose? Is this meant to like mirror older movies where maybe acting was much different and writing was much different? But it was just, I'm pretty sure the writing was just bad. And not all the acting was bad, but the dialogue was really bad, and the actors could only do so much with it,
Yeah, I mean, maybe they were trying to kind of model it off of that 50s to 70s era sci-fi which
Yeah.
it's hard to replicate now. It's not that time anymore.
Right. And so in the next scene, I don't remember exactly what's happening here. I think they're in a car in the El Camino driving, but my next note was they're acting like they're married. This random woman that he's known for like 2 days and Noah are acting like they're married. They're just like talking like they're married. They're talking about their future. It's just a really weird. We're supposed to just accept that this is their future together.
Yeah, it is strange, and his motivations are all explained later
at the end, but hers are not really.
Not so much.
Yeah,
because and again, so his whole plan is to take them up to Jackfish Lake in Canada, where he would go fishing with this guy who was like a father figure to him. And, everyone believes that like there's no lakes left. There's not going to be anything up there, yada, 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 yada. So even like if that was true, this whole time I'm like, so what? They're going to grow old and die, and then the kid's just going to be in the forest by himself?
Apparently.
Like, what's the plan here?
So we get a scene where if you hadn't already figured out that this guy with the eye patch was the villain, now you get to see him eating sardines.
Oh, yeah. Oh, from the trophy?
Yeah. And yeah, so it was gross. Just a weird thing. So yeah, my note was eating raw sardines with an eye patch villain confirmed.
With his hands.
Yeah, just straight out of the tin.
That was so gross.
It was nasty. So at this point we get so they show up to a junkyard, what nowadays we would consider like a salvage yard or something like that. What in this universe, it's probably just a car dealer. But this person, they're negotiating, right? Because this El Camino is not a practical car for them, for the family. They, whenever anybody has a family, they need to upgrade to a station wagon or a crossover or something. So what does Nic Cage want?
It also says Humanity Bureau all across.
Yeah, which is great. But he's trying to negotiate for the trade for his 1981 El Camino, and he brings that up. And he talks about how the battery is worth $1,000 these days. But money isn't really money doesn't exist in the sense. So I don't really know
well, I think it's like, because earlier he brings out the coffee can to Rachel, and she mentions that like you could buy a house with this out here. And so like there's clearly like a sense of monetary value and like a barter system in place for people who are not inside the cities.
Yeah, well, and it's probably more for like to not be tracked by the government or whatever their purchases, I'm assuming.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, this is the point when he mentions that they haven't made cars in 30 years. So at this point, you had 1998 Dodge Durango was the newest car we had seen at this point. So you add 30 years to that.
Well, were those models from 1998?
They looked like it.
Okay.
And the only reason why I think that is because when I was growing up, my parents bought a brand new 1998 Dodge Durango the year they came out.
Okay.
And so I didn't notice any of the updated taillights or anything like that. It's kind of a car nerd thing. I don't want to get too deep into that, but they did look like 1998 models. But even if I'm wrong, and who knows, because cars have been around for a while. These cars have been through a lot at this point. Who knows what's been changed. That would be the earliest it could be, would be 2028, because 1998 plus 30 years,
28.
Yeah. And so it could still be 2030, but there is another car later that shows up that could change this, but we'll get to that.
I don't know. It's weird for me to think that a movie made in 2017 would have set up a world where we went into dystopia at the turn of the century, because then like, I don't know, like a lot of that just doesn't really work out for me.
Well, that sounds like a you problem. I mean, it's an alternate timeline, so who knows what could have happened. But it's still a timeline where Trump was still president at some point.
Maybe he wasn't president. Maybe he was just, because I mean he dressed more or less the same in the 90s, right? It's not like
somebody else
different.
Used the exact same slogan as him. I mean, I don't know. It's a weird thing.
That's
I don't want to get too
much
into politics, but
yeah. But if you assume that it's supposed to be him with the president, right, then it has to have taken place sometime after 2016. And so that pushes the date at least 30 years after 2016.
He just said they stopped making cars 30 years ago.
Right.
So just because they stopped making cars doesn't necessarily mean that's when the apocalypse happened. That may have been the start of the downfall.
I mean, yeah, that's true. But
I mean,
I
look
feel
at
like,
COVID. COVID, there were like car lots were empty
but there were still
during
cars.
COVID.
Like there is still a
Sure.
2020, 2021 model year.
But I'm
Like,
saying that in something worse than COVID,
sure.
it could have shut cars down, but things could have still.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I'm just saying, like, that would have happened in 2016. I don't think it could happen any earlier than that. Is all I'm saying.
Logistics probably don't work out, but I'm just it's not that hard for me to imagine a world where they stopped making cars, but there was still civilization for a while.
Sure.
Then we get a scene where the villain with an eye patch and eating sardines goes into an elevator, the same elevator where Nic Cage met his contact. And he stops the elevator instead of the contact. And this scene is probably the most overacted scene in the whole movie. I mean, yeah, the actors for these characters, Hugh Dillon and whoever the other guy is, David Lofgren, they just went all out. They were like, this is my scene and I have to nail it. And so they gave everything they have in this scene. Kudos to them for that. It stood out more than it should have because of that. It made the villain kind of just look even more like just a mustache twirl and I'm evil for being evil villain.
Right.
You know, he claims that he's going to murder this guy's family if he doesn't give him this information about what he told Noah. And it's, yeah. And then my next note is dead family. So I think they just killed the people anyway.
Oh yeah, because they definitely show that shot. They are dead. They assaulted, beat up, and strangled the mom and kid. And the kid's like 6, maybe 8.
It was pretty brutal. You know, I mean, the makeup wasn't great. So for me, it was like not a believable thing, but it was.
That's what they were trying to say.
Traumatic. Yes, they were showing the dead family. And then we get to meet the German NPC. I think he was German. But this just gave me more Fallout vibes because, you know, you get all these characters that have weird accents and stuff in the Fallout games.
The guy with the bus.
Yes. Yeah, there's like a random family with a bus, which is also something you would see in Fallout.
Well, remember, that's who. So the woman that they trade cars with tells him to look.
Does that not feel like a quest to you? Like a normal quest you would go into a video game? Like you go to one person and they're like, oh, you have to take this car and go meet this other person and they have information on how to get across the border. Yeah. Or, you know, it felt very much like a game. But yeah, this guy is just he has a very thick German accent.
Because his family was vacationing in America and things didn't go well.
Yeah, during the apocalypse, apparently. Or like just pre-apocalypse.
Just before. You know. And
yeah, apparently the tool he needed to get across the border was just a Geiger counter.
Well, and the meds.
But I mean, it's not like it's stuff that they act like it's this device that, you know, that he's crafted from his own, you know, I don't know. It made it seem like it was something fancy, but it's just a Geiger counter. You can get them at an antique store. Like it's not.
Well, the woman basically, she doesn't know what it is. She just knows if anybody knows how to get across, it's him. That's all. So like there's this, because what's happened.
It's just set up to be more than a Geiger counter, I feel like. And then it was just a Geiger counter. So.
Well, because the setup isn't so much the device as the perception. Everybody has been pushed into believing that there's just like this unstoppable force at the border that nobody could possibly get past. And
it was radiation, essentially. Right. This is what they thought it would be. That there's such severe radiation because there's a power plant up there that nobody could get past it without dying of radiation poisoning. And so you need a Geiger counter to follow the path of the lowest radiation and make sure you aren't above whatever reading they said.
Yeah, I think it was like 5,000 rads or whatever a day.
And the German guy at one point warns them that they will rape you and the boy.
If they come up, so he basically says that anybody else you come across at this point is like hostile. Treat them as they're hostile, which you would think would come up in a movie like this. and it
Never
doesn't.
does. But also he like specifically mentions rape, which
Yeah. Well,
is a little weird.
his daughter was.
Is that who mentioned it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Either way, that makes it even darker, because it implies that something may have happened.
Well, because like his wife was killed, and then his daughter was raped.
It just seems like if you're warning someone about violent people, that murder would be like the scary thing that you would want to mention to them. So that just kind of came out of left field for me. So they start driving to Canada, and at this point it feels like the woman has not, like, when did she ever agree to go to Canada? Like, she just kind of joined him because they were running from people who were trying to kill him, and he just decides they're going to Canada.
Well, they do have a bit of an argument about it.
They do after this note. I wrote this note down, and then like 2 seconds in the movie later, they have a little bit of an argument about it. But yeah, at this point in the movie, they hadn't had that argument, so I was just kind of in my mind going, when did she ever agree to going to this guy's? He thinks there's a lake still in Canada that was there when he was a kid, and that's where he wants to go for no other reason than he has good memories there, and for some reason she is totally okay with this. Yeah. But then they have a discussion about it. It's admittedly only like a 30-second discussion, and then it's over.
Well, that the time? Is that when the big reveal happens?
No, that's later.
Is that later? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's after. So my next note is that the evil guy has a timeshare pool.
Yeah.
Just in case you weren't convinced of how evil this guy was, in this place where like it's illegal to sell fresh water without a license, and that everybody is drinking dirty water, he has a pool that is crystal clear, and
Indoor.
he mentions indoor, and he mentions that it's a timeshare during the conversation with his other evil guy.
He's like, you wouldn't believe what I pay for this place.
Right.
I come here once a month.
He keeps trying to splash this guy. Yeah. That's how much of a villain is. He's just wasting this water, splashing into this guy. So
the other guy, Agent Porter, we learn he doesn't know how to swim.
Right.
And he's a fairly young guy. He's not like, in his, maybe he's in his 30s or something. He never learned to swim. So to me, it sounds like he basically grew up in the apocalypse.
Right. Yeah. And so that was just a weird scene, just establish even more that the villain is a villain.
He's very much taking the advantage of the system that he's in.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then they're driving to Canada, and they get spotted by what's apparently a solar powered drone. So at this point, it makes me wonder if tech has advanced that far. It's just they're in a weird place technology wise, because I feel like the size of that drone, they would have to have such efficient solar panels to power that thing to run for as long as it does. That technology does not exist yet, or maybe it does for the government, I guess. I don't know.
And that's the thing. Like, this is like a legit military drone. I certainly don't know enough about what that technology is.
A lot of like high-end drones these days can run for like 12 minutes.
Well,
that's not even an exaggeration.
No, but the military ones can go significantly longer than that because we send them to other countries.
Probably, but this one, it like makes it seem like they're sitting there for hours and hours and hours.
We might be
it's
able
just
to
circling.
We very well may be able to do that today.
Maybe. I'm saying that in terms of what they're wanting us to believe based on the other technology in the movie, and them not making vehicles anymore and using 1998 Dodge Durangos for their government vehicles.
Yeah, but
it's harder for me to believe.
Look at their phone technology.
Yeah, that's another thing that's weird. Why is their phone technology so advanced, but they can't come up with something more efficient than a Durango to drive around in? You know what I mean? There's just a weird dichotomy between a lot of the technology in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, my take on it is that the military's budget continued to balloon in time of crisis, like it does in the real world, and so they have the money.
So he's using a military phone?
I mean, he does work for a bureau in the government, and so it might require like certain security protocols or whatever that you couldn't have without it.
Maybe. Right? I don't know. We're getting kind of into the weeds on something that doesn't really matter in the end. But yeah, it was hard for me to believe that they would still have access to drones like this. But yes, you're right. The phones being so advanced, maybe there's something there. Either way, they're sitting in this car, hiding like a sniper with a ghillie suit over there. They have like a car ghillie suit over the car to kind of make it look like the environment. And while they're doing this, the kid's like playing with with fire in the
Matches.
back seat. Yeah,
Play
he's
with
like
matches.
lighting matches. He's so bored. And it's just I mean, for people that have kids, it's probably a pretty, like, something that you're very familiar with, you know, kids being bored and just doing stupid things to try and get people's attention. And for me, it was more just like annoying.
Well, my takeaway was, don't you think matches are probably hard to come by? Wouldn't you want to save those in
You would
case,
think,
like,
but I guess not. So at this point, my next note is, wait, so that's his kid. So they have him and the woman have a talk, and she took the name of a person that he had sex with like 8 years ago.
11?
They aren't. It isn't really implied that there's much of a relationship beyond that.
No,
They knew
so,
each other for like a week or something.
so that's the thing. Earlier on in the car, when you were talking about like how they're like getting to know each other, she mentions, he asks about the boy's father, and she says it was just some guy who came through and he stayed for a week. I think that's the real story for the real mother, and that's what.
Yes.
And when we learn everything, that's who, that Nick was the guy
Yeah, I
who came
agree.
through and stayed for a week.
Yeah. So that woman died, and now this woman is using her name, and so that's why Nic Cage, from the beginning of this, had like so many weird interactions with the kid, and seemed to care about this family more than he cared about a lot of other people that he dealt with, because he recognized the name and recognized that this woman was not the person that should have this name, and the kid lined up with the age.
Now here's the big question. You ready for this?
Sure.
So Nic Cage, when he learns the truth about New Eden, he wants to save these people. Do you think he would have had any type of reaction like that if his kid was not involved? Would he have continued to be then a conscious bad guy, knowing the truth?
Yes, but I feel like he would have been looking for a way out of it. I
Interesting.
thought he was a company man. I mean, the only reason why he didn't stop, or why he stopped at this point for sure, is because it was his family. I think, but we don't get a lot of context, so it's hard to tell. We see one other case, so we don't really know.
Right.
But we know that he got into a gunfight with this guy over New Eden and killed an old man.
Well, I mean, he was getting shot at with a shotgun, so I mean,
sure, but the guy was just trying to save his own life. So,
oh yeah, I mean, I'm not saying the guy wasn't justified. I'm just saying Nick at the same time, like
so
it wasn't like he killed him in cold blood.
I don't remember exactly what happened, but at some point one of the Durangos rolls and like blows up, and that seems like it was the highest dollar shot in the movie, like where their budget went.
Right. Why does that happen? Can't remember what
They're shown to be like, so a lot of the bad guys are shown to be pretty far back from where Nic Cage is. I can't remember exactly what was happening with this note, but my next note says, how did he catch up? Because I think they were way back, and then all of a sudden they're right on.
I have no idea. The only possible explanation I have is that they didn't drive the whole way. They got like airlifted or something.
Yeah, because the bad guy like shows up on I don't know. He just shows up at this place where they parked, and he was shown to be in like their headquarters
multiple times
the day before.
Right, he's swimming in the pool. He's checking out Noah's apartment. He's getting threatened with the crate. Right, like while they're flying down the road.
But now he's immediately like right on the edge of Canada, essentially.
Yeah.
And so they stop at this like abandoned warehouse type place. And the kid's like, I got to go take a leak. I'm going to go take a leak or whatever. And he goes by himself and goes pee in this bathroom. And he hears weird noises. And
he goes number 2.
Yeah, he needs to take a poo-poo.
Yeah.
And the leak thing, I don't really know why. He does need to go poo. And he ends up being captured by the guy.
Who's like essentially like drowning him in a filled up sink of gross water.
Yeah, there's a sink with gross water. Yeah, and the guy comes up behind him and like plunges his head into the water and blah blah blah. And eventually the kid somehow gets away. I can't remember all the details, but he like goes into like a little grate underneath, or like a wall grate.
Well, so what happens is when Nick goes to look for him.
Yeah.
And when Adam sees Noah, he, for some reason, stops trying to drown Lucas at this point. There's no explanation for why that is, other than maybe he just gets bored. And
Yeah.
so he goes after Noah, but then all these other people show up and start shooting at Noah, and you have him running from like 3 or 4 machine guns in one of the
With
most
like no
comedic,
cover.
no cover. He's like, he's just like running. It looks so bad.
It's like Kermit, when Kermit runs, he's got his arms in the air. That's
Dude,
exactly what it's like.
it reminded me of like a cutaway that Family Guy would have done.
Yeah, it
Honestly,
was
it
it
was
was
bad.
ridiculous. Somehow all these guys with like fully automatic machine guns completely miss him.
Right? Like it's so terrible. So then
And the
after
kid
all,
gets away.
the kid gets well. So after that, you find out that the kid pickpocketed the dude's new Adam's new eyeball that he has on
Yeah,
him, but hasn't been installed yet
I guess.
for whatever
Well,
reason.
it's a glass eye, so you just pop it in, you pop it out. But for some reason, right now he's wearing an eye patch instead
Okay.
of having the glass eye popped in.
Yeah. And so he pretends to drop it down in this grate system. He's like, oh, I'll get it. And then he escapes through
Yeah,
the human-sized grate system.
right. And then he just happens to pop up out of the grate right in front of where Noah is driving and almost gets hit.
When
And they're like,
there was a moment
get in.
I
And
thought this
he
movie
gets
was
in.
going to take a turn.
Yeah, that would have been a weird moment. But yeah, he gets into the car, and they get away. So they think.
I mean,
And
they killed most of the agents.
yeah, they get to the border, and Nic Cage has his Geiger meter out, and it's reading really low. And so the woman is like, oh, the battery. And she pulls the battery out and takes a new battery from the kid's lantern. And she just, okay, this was really funny. I don't know if you noticed this, but she literally just takes the battery, like drops it in.
Yeah,
You can tell that this Geiger counter is like an empty thing. Yeah. And she just drops it in, and magically it starts working, but it reads the same thing. So the battery was not the problem. So they're trying to figure out why this radiation is so low when all the stories say that it's supposed to be irradiated, and they can see the power plant across the way, and they figure out that it's just been a lie this whole time, that nobody's dared to check it out in all these years.
Well, Nick's got a line where he's like, "Why build a wall when you can build fear?"
You're like, yeah, that was probably one of the better line in the movies, honestly, which is saying something. But
it's a very it's a good line, but it's also like for when this movie was made, it was a very specific, on purpose line.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It was like the tagline for the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so they just continue through to Canada with no real issues until I think they get stopped by the government people again. Is that what happens? Or they get out to do something?
So this gets them through the power plant, right? But their car eventually dies. It overheats.
That's right.
And so they're walking and they can see the border. And then all of a sudden, Adam starts showing up behind them. And so they like race into the Canadian border right as the agents show up. But I mean, it's an empty wilderness. And so the agents are like,
yeah, it's like snowy.
Yeah, there's nobody at the station. There's like a little station there. There's nobody in there. And so they have like this big confrontation in the snowy forest.
Yeah, and immediately the people get out and shoot the woman in the head.
Almost immediately.
Yeah, basically right away.
Yeah.
It's a clean shot right to the exact same place that everybody else gets shot. I'm guessing because it's an easy place to VFX. It's just like the middle of the forehead. But yeah, so she just gets popped in the head immediately and falls over dead, and right in front of the kid. And Noah,
the kid doesn't know, by the way, his parental situation at all.
That Nic Cage is his father. Yeah.
Well, he also thinks that she's his real mother.
Right. But he doesn't really have a big reaction. And so Noah's like, no, let the kid go. He doesn't know anything. Just let him go. And so he goes, I'm feeling generous. I'll let the kid go. And the kid runs on, and he goes, run! Like he yells at the kid to run because they give him like a limited amount of time.
I really thought that Adam was going to shoot the kid in the back.
Yeah, I did too. But so
we did skip. There was a part we skipped. There's a line that's very important because I think it makes this movie very strange. Earlier on, after they escape from the fact that like the warehouse or whatever, Adam is talking to Agent Porter and he tells him straight up that we're on the wrong side of history. He says that line. He says, you can't kill 7 million people and not have somebody find out about it. We're on the wrong side of history. And in my mind, I was like, oh, okay. So is he going to like stop hunting Nick? But no, he's like, we're on the wrong side of history, man. But I also have a pool timeshare, so I'm just going to keep digging.
And a sardine fetish, apparently. But yeah, They just I don't think it's as relevant to the movie as you did, but yes,
Well,
that is something that is said.
it was like the movie wanted to be self-aware.
No, the movie, the villain is as generic of a villain as you could possibly have. He knows he's on the wrong side. He doesn't care. He's happy with the way his life is and will continue doing bad things to keep his life the
So
way it is.
I'm looking for
It's
meaning where
very
there is none.
two-dimensional. Yes,
Okay.
you're looking for meaning where there is none.
I want it to be better.
I feel like maybe a writer thought maybe that would be an interesting thing to add in, but then they're like, nah. But anyway, yeah, he tells the kid to run, and the kid, runs off into the woods. And then they shoot Nic Cage in the head. The kid gets a little ways away, and then they shoot Nic Cage in the exact same spot on his forehead. And yeah, the kid runs back, and he's like crying, and the villain's like, "Oh, okay, the little boy crying," and he's like gonna shoot him, and then a sniper randomly shows up and starts killing everybody.
Everybody but the kid.
Everybody but the kid.
Agent Porter. Agent Porter gets away for some reason.
Yeah, one of them gets away, but he snipes everybody else, and then a guy just I know the sniper was a different guy, and then another dude just walks up and like adopts the kid.
Yeah, so this is where we find out that Nick wasn't actually going to Jackfish Lake. He had some deal set up with the Canadian government to provide data and inform on this genocide that's taking place within New America.
And he had given this kid a rabbit's foot earlier in the movie where he thought it was just a nice token, but the people that rescued the kid go, well, did he give you anything? And the kid hands over the rabbit's foot, and they twist the bottom of the rabbit's foot off, and there's the USB drive or whatever.
Which has all the data about New Eden. And then we get to see the scene where Cross learns about New Eden, and we learn that like there's gas chambers and they're burning people alive, very Holocaust designed type stuff, based in history. And so the Canadian government, I guess, is going to work with a rebellion in New America to overthrow the current.
Yeah, it starts showing the rebellion and like a bunch of
We get to see the German guy again.
Yeah, the German guy and
the lady at the car place.
There's a random scene of the kid jumping into the lake.
So that I think is not Lucas. I think that's supposed to be Nic Cage's character Noah as a kid. Like he's dead. This is like his afterlife. Like
no, man, that was the kid. It's showing that the kid is getting to do this like Nic Cage told him the stories about through the whole movie.
I didn't think that was the kid.
It looked just like him.
I don't know. But I thought it wasn't the same.
It doesn't
actor.
make it a better movie either way.
No.
No, either way you interpret it or whatever was intended, it doesn't really change the end of the movie. I mean, for me, it makes more sense that it's the kid rather than Nic Cage's character. But either way, it doesn't make it any better of a movie. It's still not a great movie, but yeah, that's basically the end. So
Agent Porter does get killed by a mob.
Yes.
On the highway, and New America supposedly, like we're supposed to believe that it gets overthrown and New Eden is dismantled theoretically.
Right. Oh, okay. So the thing that throws the year into question. There's a scene where during the Revolution.
Okay.
There's like a scene of a car that's on fire or blows up or something.
Okay.
And it's like a 2003 era Ford Escape, I believe. And so that pushes it to maybe, but this is at like the very end of the movie.
Right.
That pushes the 30 years a little later than 2030, if that's the case. But
I mean, if that was all that it was though, like, I mean, if you mean 28 or 29 and you said they haven't made a car in 30 years, like you're not being specific, but
they were definitely like, well, nobody's going to notice that this is a 2003 or whatever. Right. You know what I mean? It was a car that was on fire, but yeah, I don't know. That was the only other hint we got as to the year. So
my guess is the synopsis is just a not great synopsis.
Well, I mean, if you go off the Durangos, then it's correct. I mean, because that would have put it in 2028.
This movie, it
was close to it.
Worldwide, this movie grossed $58,970.
Yeah, I mean that tracks.
It did win an award. By the way,
Razzie?
No, it won best sci-fi VR film.
VR film
at Cinequest San Jose Film Festival.
So a virtual reality film.
Yeah.
What is a virtual reality film?
I assume it's a movie that if you were to watch it in VR makes you feel like you're part of the film. Maybe there's an alternate cut that's like
Is that
first
a
person
thing?
or
I'm pretty
something.
sure that's not a thing.
I mean, there
There's
are
like 3D films. There's 3D films that you can watch on a VR headset, but I've never heard of a VR film.
VR productions. They're not like you like. I mean, they're not like from major production studios because you can't put them in theaters. But there are VR short
Okay, so
films.
basically it's because this was probably the only film that came out this year that was done that way.
I mean, maybe yeah. I'd have to. I mean,
I can't imagine, as someone who's played several different types of VR, I can't imagine this movie would be any better in VR. But and I don't even see how it could translate well to it. But I've been wrong before, so lots of times.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm not familiar with. Let's see. But um, yeah. I don't know. Couldn't tell you.
Yeah. Oh well, no point dwelling on it. Dead air.
Wait, is that okay? John Travolta was in a VR film called Speed Kills that also won an award that year at the same festival.
So they just basically give it to every film that was a VR film, apparently, whatever that is.
Possibly. I don't know. There's best sci-fi VR film, best virtual reality, and then best virtual reality storytelling
Weird.
and visionary leader in virtual reality.
All right, we got to rate this thing.
That's
We're pushing our time.
all right. All right. So yeah, so we rate everything on quality and caginess. Score of 0 through 20. 20 is high. I guess 1 through 20. 1 is low. Ryan, we're going to start with you here. Overall quality for the Humanity Bureau.
I mean, it wasn't, but it was definitely not the worst film we watched. I enjoyed this film for the most part. Like I said, it wasn't a good film, but I did enjoy aspects of it, and I enjoyed watching it. It kept my attention. I'm going to give it like a 7.
A 7.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm with you. I like the premise a lot more than the movie itself. Like,
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
like there's a good idea here.
Sure.
Right?
It's just buried.
Right. It's not executed.
It's in the video game called Fallout.
I feel like if they had like some decent money, I think they could have pulled off a cool movie here. So I'm actually going to give it a little bit of a bump. And I'm going to give it a 9.
Okay.
I'm going to give that a 9. So that gives it a score of an 8 overall. I was tempted to give it a 10 because it's not like that puts it right in the middle of being good and bad.
Right.
You know?
It's definitely a very middling movie,
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't terrible, but it also wasn't good.
Right. But I'm going to go with a 9. Then we have caginess. So the caginess, this one, I mean, he's not cagey at all.
No, not at all. Not even any hints, really.
Right. And like the only other movie that was really like low caginess to this level was, of course, Joe. Rage was pretty low as well, and Stolen was pretty low. I mean, I would give this a 1. I can't think of a single moment that was cagey.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, it just wasn't a cagey movie.
Okay.
It was definitely closer to Joe than something like Leaving Las Vegas or something like that. Except Joe was a much better movie.
Joe was very good. Yeah, Joe was a good movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so a 1 for caginess. So we've got an 8 on overall quality and a 1 for caginess. So that does put it in the low quarter, but kind of interesting, off by itself there a little bit. So there you have it.
I don't think we've had one that was just kind of in the middle and super low caginess, because a lot of the middling ones, they try and lean into the cage, and give him some moments to do his thing. But this one didn't really do that.
Yeah, it's kind of off by itself right now for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so that is it for the Humanity Bureau on our 1-year anniversary episode of the show. If you didn't know, and if you're watching and can see, we've got merch now. We've got Big Nick Energy merch that you can get on our TeePublic store. And
That's
so
right.
If you go to comingofcage.com, we got the link for you there. You can get t-shirts and stickers and notebooks and hoodies and all that kind of cool stuff to represent. We got 4 different Nic Cage faces to choose from, inspired by Nic Cage films. So go check that out. And of course, you can get all the links to our show at comingofcage.com as well. And you can follow us at Coming of Cage on your social media apps. Ryan, anything else for the Humanity Bureau or anything about our first year?
No, I'm looking forward to the second year. I'm a little worried because we've done basically all his like Oscar nominated and winning movies. So other than I think he was nominated for Pig, but yeah, we pretty much covered all of them. So I worry that this next year is going to be all kind of like middling and crappy movies. But well, I hope there's a few surprises in there. We'll see.
Well, I'm looking forward to when we get into his Trinity, his 90s Trinity that
we haven't hit any of those yet.
Yeah,
so
nothing. So there's still some good stuff.
There are some good ones. Yeah, I'm just talking about the more like critically acclaimed. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it. Let us know if you have a favorite or a least favorite movie we've covered so far in year one. Otherwise, we will be back in 2 weeks for episode 27. Make sure you join us for our Wheel O' Cage.
Well, we got to add something to the wheel, don't we?
Oh, we do. Oh my gosh. See, I've been doing this for a year and I already forgot, but Ryan's got me. Yes. Thank you so much. We have to figure out what movie is going to join the Wheel O' Cage. So the Wheel O' Cage, we spin it every other week to determine what Nicolas Cage movie we will cover. And then, of course, we have to add something to the wheel. And so the movie joining the wheel is Kiss of Death.
All right.
Will join the wheel. So you can go to comingofcage.com to find our Wheel of Cage spin a week from this episode coming out to find out what movie gets picked next. Now I think we're done.
Boom.
Boom. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Or watching.